Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with love and intimacy coach Carolin Hauser. She talked about her business of helping couples find a more lasting and loving future together. She also talks about the beginnings in her life when she had a vision before birth about how she was going to live out her life and help couples that were in trouble down here. She has an interesting story and a varied background, a lot of optimism. Enjoy this interview.
I want to start off by addressing COVID in the last 3 years and what we've all gone through. I'm curious, how did you survive that time period, and how has it changed not only the way that you live your life, but the way that you conduct business?
I survived it very well because somehow I ended up in Sedona right before COVID started. And Sedona was a really good place to be during COVID because everybody that couldn't go anywhere traveling came here. And a lot of people, Sedona is known for, people come here to find themselves and find answers and things like that. So for somebody like me, I just was in the right time and the right place, at the right place and the right time, basically. And plus also Sedona is usually a very, very busy place with like tens of thousands of people. And, obviously the numbers of visitors did drop down. And so I also got to experience Sedona at a time where it wasn't overrun. So I actually got to be on the hiking trails and out and about a lot. There were a couple months where everything was pretty much shut down. We were just kind of like, we stayed with ourselves, and we had just gotten a puppy. So we got to spend a lot of time on the trails with the puppy, which was amazing. And my business did not suffer. Let's put it that way.
I would imagine things probably got better because of COVID, business-wise.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. A lot more people are looking for, answers.
Absolutely. That reminds me of what you said about it being, kind of an ideal place. When 9/11 happened, I was in the back of a water taxi in Venice, Italy, and I was young, and I was backpacking through Italy. And I remember going to a little town across from the French Riviera called the Poor Man's Riviera. It was Cinque Terre in Italy.
Yeah.
And I was in a little town called Vernazza, and it's kind of an old hippie commune. And I remember thinking, with everything that was going on in the world, it was the perfect place to be because it was almost as though everybody was oblivious. There was this level of panic and dread that I kept hearing about in the States that was just not going on there at the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's wild. So I'm going to just kind of get you to kind of boil down a little bit or kind of pare down a little bit what you do for a living. And I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day. And one of the kids is going to look up at you and say, "What do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
I help grown-up people get along better so that they can be happy and have a house that's filled with love and fun, and so that, they're good parents to you, and so that they can just be having a great atmosphere in their house.
So when you were in the third grade, what was your dream when you grew up? What you want to become?
I think in the third grade, I still wanted to be a pediatrician.
Wonderful. Are you happy with how everything turned out?
Yes, I'm very happy. I'm very happy with what I do. I love helping couples. It makes me very happy.
So let's go back to the beginnings of your life where you were born and raised. Tell me how these seeds started to grow in you, to become somebody that wants to help people in relationships be better. How did that happen?
Yeah, and you'll probably chuckle, or your listeners will chuckle. For me, this happened actually before I was born because I have a memory, and I'm just describing it as best as I can, but the memory is kind of like me being on the Heavenly Meadows, which looked like a kindergarten meadow or something with little chairs and little tables, and I was sitting there and playing, and God or source or whatever you want to call it, coming down to us. It felt like it was coming down to us and saying, "Hey, there is big problems on the earth. Men and women don't get along anymore. There's a lot of fighting and disharmony, and they need help. Who wants to go?" And my hand just raised itself. That's my first memory. And
wow.
then my next memory, or the next part of my life, was like I was born to my parents, and and my parents both came. So I'm from Germany. I was born in Germany, and my grandparents were children during the World War II, and so there was a lot of trauma that got inflicted on them. And then when they were parents to my parents, they kind of did their best, but they still passed on a lot of trauma to my parents. And then it kind of got passed. I mean, obviously my life was already way, way better than, or my childhood than the childhood of my grandparents, but there's still some trauma that got passed on to me. And so my biggest struggle then was with myself. I really struggled with addictions and just not feeling good about myself, and depression for a long time, like from when I was 10 till 20. And that was my first relationship. Work was the relationship with myself and healing all of that. Yeah, that's what got me onto this path.
Yeah. So do you think that vision you had early on was kind of like a reincarnate or like a pre-life? How do you quantify that now?
Well, I believe that, there's people that believe that we come here to learn our lessons, and then at some point when we've learned enough lessons, we can choose to not be here and be somewhere else. I believe that I came here because I wanted to be here, because I really love people and I love the earth and I love helping God. And so I believe I've been here many, many times, and I don't have to be here anymore. I've learned my lessons, and I came here because I really, really just wanted to help.
So, the one thing about being in your line of business is obviously you're an expert. You've been at this for a long time. You see things probably that most people don't. So my question to you is that, all of us want love and we want a good relationship, but somehow we just can't make it right. Men and women, the fact that we can even communicate is a miracle sometimes because we think so differently. But when you take all of the relationships that you've worked with over your life and you think about it in a grand scale, what's one of the most common things that couples get wrong that are relatively easy to fix? Hard to recognize, but somewhat easy to fix.
So the biggest problem generally, and my specialty is really longer term relationships, is that women think that guys just want to have sex and women just want to connect. And in the end, they both want the same. They're both missing the same. They're both lacking the same. And they just cannot understand each other, or they have such misperceptions of each other that they just keep hammering each other, even though they're like barking up the same tree and they don't see it.
The one thing that usually gives us a lot of fuel in life are those like role models or heroes. Who's that meant for you in your life?
For me, it's been a couple people, but most recently, over the last 6-7 years, is a woman. Her name is called Marnia Robinson, and she made one of the biggest discoveries in terms of intimacy and sexuality that I believe, could have been made, and it's really very much influenced the basis of how I work with couples, and also the statement that I just made about couples barking up the same tree and not knowing it.
So if you could meet anybody alive on the planet right now and spend some time with them, who would you love to meet and talk to?
Oh, that is a good question. I have access to Marnia, so that's already a reality. Who would I want to meet? It's a very interesting question. Oprah, I guess.
She tends to be the top answer for sure. So, yeah. So let me ask you that, you're in a profession where you're helping people and you have to give a lot of yourself, but you also have to keep some of that back for you because you have to take care of yourself. How do you balance that out? How do you balance that your job is one that demands a lot out of you to help people, but you also need to take care of yourself?
Yeah, I very much practice what I preach, and a lot of what I preach and teach has to do with energy management, your own energy management, and learning to manage your energy as a couple. And there's practices, physical practices, spiritual practices, energetic practices that you can do by yourself, but also as a couple, that will really help you sustain your energy and have amazing, stable energy and for everything that you want to do. And even if that's a lot that you have in life,
Yeah. Have you noticed the couples that, and there was a lot of couples that probably broke up during the COVID pandemic time period. There was a lot, though, that stayed together. Have you noticed that there's been an extra bond, an extra strength that goes into couples that have weathered and gone through this pandemic together?
I don't know if there's an extra bond because they went through the pandemic together, but there's definitely an extra effort in like wanting to make things better and not being willing to tolerate things the way they were, you know. So I would say there's an extra effort in like, okay, like let's not tolerate this, let's make it better.
So every day you wake up, you have an agenda, you have things that you want to do, things that you want to accomplish. So I'm curious, what motivates you? What drives you every day?
I have very specific goals in my business that I want to reach in terms of like, you know, how many people I want to reach and how much income I want to have so that I can do the things that I want to do philanthropically and in my life. That motivates me. And then also just a very clear sense of purpose and also really, I'm very aware that we're only here for a short amount of time, and I want to be able to look myself in the eye, you know, on my last day and know that I really gave my all and not squandered any time or wasted it or, you know, like I owe it to myself to make the best of my life.
So at the end of the proverbial day, how do you quantify a good day? How do you look back and say that was the kind of day that worked for me?
I quantify it by how many people have reached out, how many people I've been able to help, the quality of my if my loved ones are happy, if I had time, you know, to spend time with them or do stuff with them, and how happy they are for sure. You know, if they're not happy because I'm working too much or whatever, then, you know, that's an indicator. And then also I quantify it by how I feel. You know, if I feel really happy and content and tired, you know, but not worn out or depleted, then I know it was a good day.
What's been one of the best success stories? What's been one of the best client success stories that you've ever had that you remember that kind of reverberates with you?
Yeah. One is from a couple where they have 5 kids, and she was just not the touchy-feely type. He always wanted more. He was always the one saying, hey, you know, like, when can I get some? And maybe it happened once a month, maybe not. You know, it was always very, like, it was just a constant battle for them. Their needs just seemed very on opposite ends, and they both had a sense that if they didn't do something, you know, it really was affecting or deteriorating their relationship. And so within a short amount of time with them learning and getting help, she then was in a place where if they didn't make love like 3 or 4 times a week, she thought something was wrong. And that was just, you know, it's hilarious, but also amazing to have somebody go from, oh, I'm just not the touchy-feely type, you know, and maybe I want it once a month, to feeling like there's something wrong when it's not happening 3 or 4 times a week.
Yeah, that's quite a transformation. So as an author, when you were growing up, what was the book that you read that really either opened up the doors to loving reading or wanting to write someday?
That's a good question. I think it might have been, I don't think it was necessarily a book, but I think it was actually the Jungle Book, but it might have I don't think I read it. I think maybe my parents read it to me, or I saw the movie, or I wrote my first story, and it was about some animals and some animal that was abandoned in the forest and stuff when I was 13, and I definitely think that was very much inspired by the Jungle Book.
So everyone out there has a perception of you, an idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your readers, your clients, but you ultimately live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I am a very strong-willed woman who has a big purpose. I do think that I can affect change in the world. I do live my life pretty much in service, but I'm also somebody who really makes sure that I have fun and that I take care of myself. And I think I'm a really good friend and a very good mentor or cheerleader.
Let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into like the 20-year-old version of yourself, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom that you've gained in your life, the roads you've been down. What advice would you give your younger self?
Definitely to relax a little more and know that things work out, and then also really probably be more mindful in terms of people and who I allow in my life and who I give energy to. So maybe being a little bit more discerning in terms of who I listen to and who I choose as my mentors, or, even it took me a long time before I even allowed myself to have help and not feel like I had to do it all by myself,
Absolutely. So, Carolin, if anyone out there wants to learn more about you, get your book, learn more about your services, hire you, anything related to your world, where can they go?
My website is the best place to go. It's carolinhauser.com. That's CAROLIN, no E, and then HAUSER.com, carolinhauser.com. And I have a YouTube channel with the same Carolin Hauser name, and on Facebook also the same.
Wonderful. Carolin, thank you for opening up. Thank you for letting my listeners into your world. I really appreciate it. Good luck. Have a great new year.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, love, business, spirituality, music, and more from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.